Hi, this video is a little explanation about what Glenn Steckling stated in the last video about the space. There was no room that could hold the space people, and they could walk right through the wall and through the door. So here comes his little explanation.
Since we last had our last interaction and podcast, I understand that you had received some questions regarding my comment having to do with the people being able to walk through walls or float in the air and these type of activities. First of all, these are characteristics and traits that we are all capable of. The difference is that we are not trained, just like we are not trained from a very young age to sit in front of a piano and play a Mozart concerto. There are very few that have already that talent at the age of 3 already, but we are not trained in these type of learned experiences and learned principles. They are available to all of us. Basically, the space people from a very young age are taught that all of life is vibration and frequency. The rock has a certain frequency. The bottle has a certain frequency. The air has a certain frequency. And when you learn to control the elements and the molecules, you can take your frequency and adjust it. So let's say, for instance, air has a certain frequency of 100 megahertz. You can raise the frequency of your body to 110, and then all of a sudden you become lighter than air, because the air is a lower frequency than you, and now you are able to levitate. Or you can levitate objects by taking the stone block that they used to build the pyramids, or 100 tons to build Tiwanaku and all these other places, and simply by putting your hands over, you raise the frequency of the stone to be a higher frequency of the air, and the stone comes off the ground and goes to wherever you place it and put it. So the same thing goes for walking through the wall. They don't make a practice of doing it for extended periods of time because there are other consequences to that, but they can, if necessary, match their frequency to that of the wall and make it slightly higher so it no longer becomes a barrier. They walk through and then become the same person right on the other side. This does not mean they're metaphysically changing. It does not mean that they are interdimensionally changing or adjusting or shifting. It has none of those science fiction connotations to it. It's merely mastery of the elements. And these are the type of things that they are taught from already a young age. And George was taught that too, the mastery of the 4 elements: air, fire, water, and the 4th one I'm thinking about, I have to think about, earth. And so when you learn the mastery of those particular elements, this allows you to do things that we used to think were superstitious hogwash. In other words, alchemy. Alchemy is a very real science and ability. The ability to take something of a certain structure and realign the molecules by your command for it to become something else. Of course, the easiest is lead to gold, because there's only a very few molecules and elements differentiate from that. But it is possible to do that with the elements and become masters of the elements. And this is everyone's birthright. And the only difference is that you haven't learned how to do it yet. But you can, and I suggest that people, if they are truly sincere, will work on this. I give you an example. Everything works on frequency and vibration, like a tuning fork. If you take a tuning fork and you hit it and you point it at a glass, that frequency vibration focuses on that glass and excites the molecules in the glass to the point where the glass breaks, it shatters, right? And we've even attempted to use these methods in producing weapons that would do the same thing as well. And so that is the use of frequencies. But when Pizarro conquered the Incas, there are a few records that were left over in Spain, in the depositories, where the priests talk about watching the Inca priests levitate. And they did this by having a cup, like a giant cereal bowl. And inside that cereal bowl stood a stem, like the stem of a flower. And that stem had another smaller cup inverted inside as well and could be adjusted, slide up and down that stem. You take two of those, like the cymbals of an orchestra, you slam that thing hard enough together and your head starts vibrating like crazy. That's because of frequency. So the Inca would sit on the stone ledge overlooking the lake. They would strap these cups to their knees and then take their knees and slap them together. And after a certain amount of adjustment into the inner cup, it set up a harmonic frequency around them that allowed them to levitate by simply making that frequency around their body lighter than air. And they did it on the edge of the lake because they would levitate over the lake to practice. And then eventually, if they didn't slap their legs fast enough together, they'd fall in the water and have to swim back to shore and start it all over again. And we, the conquistadores, the invaders there, melted those things down like there was no tomorrow because of their lust for gold, and destroyed tablets and codexes that went back 100,000 years. And so the ignorance that we have perpetuated is unbelievable. But it's a very careful and accurate description of how frequency can be used. You can use it mechanically, or, if you know how to do it inwardly, then that's something that you acquire via knowledge. The mechanical contribution, of course, comes first because that allows you to understand the principle, and that allows you to understand the particular frequency that your body will be required to tune itself to, just like you have an individual fingerprint and RNA and DNA and everything is individually yours. You have your own individual frequency within the master frame of frequencies that are indicative to Homo sapiens and human beings.
So Glenn, you could actually also include telepathy in this. This is also a frequency you tune into, actually.
It is, but you need to know who you're dealing with. There is the great misnomer. They're having a UFO convention here in a few weeks, not far from here. They're calling it Alien Con, and I thought the second word was somehow very descriptive, being a con, because that's what it is to most people, a fleecing of their money and not giving them any valuable information. But then that's my opinion, and then I take it for what it's worth. But telepathy requires that you have a basic knowledge of that person first. If I meet you, then we can establish a telepathic link because we have that commonality of having met. I cannot send you a telepathic message if I don't know you. You would be just like anybody else walking the street. Yeah. But once I know you, that establishes the beginning of the link in order to start to communicate telepathically through the picture language. This idea of channeling, that's science fiction psychism. That's just a bunch of people who are using their own imagination in order to speak in tongues and voices, and so all of a sudden they can get some attention. Nobody speaks through you. You speak through you, not somebody else. And so that the telepathy then works by making that connection that also transfers itself into a vibratory, a frequency connection, because you have a frequency, and by me picturing you, we establish a link, and that link then broadcasts like a radio between two towers, the frequency, in order for us to continue a connection. It's not for the lack of a simple phrase, it's not rocket science, but we think it is so difficult. And yet, all of creation uses it. Your animals, your trees, your nature, everything is working on the projection of frequency and telepathy. That's the universal language.
It is. Yeah. I'm glad you stated it like that, Glenn. That was a good description, actually. The capability of tuning into somebody you have met. That is actually in short terms, I would say that's it. Glenn,
well, and it, not only that, it transposes itself into a wider sense. It transposes itself into the people we have met in the past, whether we want to acknowledge reincarnation and past lives. I mean, there are more people on this planet that believe in that than do the other variances. And you have to remember that Jesus taught reincarnation. He never taught resurrection. Resurrection is an invention of the church, but that's not what he taught.
No.
And so when he stood on the mountain of transfiguration and became the likenesses of other people before his disciples, he was showing them who he had been in the past. And so that's an entirely different scenario. And so that same frequency of familiarity will tie us to certain people. You meet somebody, you go to another country and you meet somebody and you say, my God, I feel like I've met you before. You are so familiar. And that's because you are. You have known them before, and there has been an interaction of some sort. You don't remember every Tom, Dick, and Harry you run across in every lifetime. That's how, that's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. But there are certain ones that stand out, and associations that stand out, and joint experiences that you may have had that stand out. And that link is also a frequency link. And there isn't anything in the world you can do to destroy that. That's nature. Thank God we are not strong enough to meddle our hands in those things as well.
Yeah, we can destroy to some point the nature, but there's some things we just can't do anything about.
Well, we can deny it. What happens is oftentimes, as many times children have said to their parents, "Oh, I remember young children. I remember a previous life and this and that." And the first thing we do is we grab the poor little souls and drag them down to the psychiatrists and therapists who are considering themselves the educational intellectuals, and nothing exists unless they have seen it in a book or written it themselves. And so they have zero knowledge of this kind of stuff. But there are many people who have told you that they are previous lives. I remember George Patton. He said, "Oh, yeah, I was a general in Napoleon's army before." I remember Lyndon Johnson had a tie to Emperor Vespasian, and Humphrey, his son, Emperor Titus. I mean, there's enough people through history who have remembered their previous actions. You don't remember, like I said, every little thing, but boy, you can have some memory, and then you get to learn that life in itself is truly eternal, and that death does not really exist. Death is merely transfiguration into the next form, the next human form, because you cannot transform yourself into an animal form. It's an entirely different frequency. And you transform into the next baby form as it's born. The moment the child is born and takes the first breath, the dying person soul transfers into that baby's form. At the age of 2, my parents recorded me speaking fluent Roman Latin in my sleep. And they recorded it too. And like I said, that doesn't make me any special person. It's just that I was in an environment where this was not considered lunacy, and where it was listened to and recorded and then investigated in order so that people can learn the truth about themselves and not all this garbage that works to confuse them until they can't see up or down.